Have you heard the terms DevOps, GitHub, infrastructure as code, CI/CD pipeline? Curious what they all mean? In this episode, we'll discuss the growing demand for DevOps engineers as organizations seek to automate their infrastructure. This includes network security. If you want to know how to develop these valuable skill sets, keep listening.
Do you want a career in cybersecurity? Are you unsure how to start? Curious what it means to be a cybersecurity professional? This is the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast with Dr. Jeff Colburn. He's a 30-year industry professional and the founder of Team Caveo, a company that specializes in helping people launch cyber careers. Join us on this podcast as we explore what it means to be a cybersecurity professional and how to get started. Welcome to the show.
Are you curious if a cyber career is right for you? Do you want to get into cyber and don't know where to start? Are you working in IT and looking to grow? Well, schedule a one-on-one cyber career coaching session with me to discuss where you are currently and how you can best move forward. Go to coaching.cyberjobhacks.com or click the link in the show notes to schedule your session today. Welcome to the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Colburn. This week, I want to talk about SecDevOps, or security development operations, and that this is that practice of combining software development with IT operations, often known as DevOps. So in the past, most network appliances were configured via the command line. Many engineers even continue to do this today as being their preferred method over anything else. Right, and this also included security appliances like most commonly the firewall. People would go in and they would configure the firewall, building out the interfaces, the networking, and then, the actual security policy or rule set. It was all done by command line, right? And then this changed with the advancement of orchestration platforms, or what we call dashboards. Now, engineers could configure and manage a firewall through a single UI. And you saw this with Palo Alto's Panorama. This thing really changed the landscape because now I can configure a common firewall policy throughout my infrastructure, right? All the firewalls throughout my infrastructure, I could just do it from the single UI. And it just really showed how cumbersome and inconsistent the command line was because, somebody might make a change on one firewall and forget to make it on another. So you had this concept of configuration drift. So once you start deploying Panorama, and now you had all your firewalls configured to Panorama, now you had this consistent security policy across your infrastructure. And you saw the same trend with network devices. Cisco came out with Catalyst Center for their campus switches, and Nexus Dashboard for their data center switches. And again, this permitted engineers to configure and manage their switches and routers without having to go to each individual device and paste in these configurations. So this brought this level of efficiency and consistency across the infrastructure, and really helped reduce human error caused by making changes to individual devices. However, even using this UI, even like using Panorama or a Catalyst Center, it's still time consuming, right? You still have to go into the UI. You're drilling through all these different screens to build the infrastructure. So it's still, it's not as time consuming as going and logging into each individual device and pasting in configs, much was the practice of the past. But it was still taking time. And then you had this DevOps concept come out, and you had automation tools like Ansible and Terraform, which just even shown how much more efficient you can be with the programming or the configuring of your infrastructure. So this introduced this concept of infrastructure as code. So rather than devices being configured individually or through a platform like Panorama or Catalyst Center, now the infrastructure is actually defined and managed using code, right? And then this code is going to serve as that source of truth for the infrastructure, and you're going to store it in a repository like GitHub. And now this code will be pushed out to the network devices or security appliances using something like Ansible, right? And in Ansible, it's referred as a playbook, and it contains all those configuration tasks and information that's required to build the infrastructure. So this and now these playbooks can either be pushed out to the orchestration platform like Panorama or Catalyst Center, or it can actually go directly to network devices like routers and switches or security appliances like a firewall, right? So Ansible is going to make these API calls. Is either going to be using like RESTconf or netconf, and so this playbook will actually just get you built in Ansible and then just pushed out to either these platforms or the actual devices themselves, and it's going to serve that playbook is going to serve as that source of truth, right? And that source of truth is what gets pushed out to all the devices. And then this is referred to as that CI/CD pipeline, right? Continuous innovation, continuous delivery. So you'll hear oftentimes when you hear infrastructure as code, you're going to hear CI/CD pipeline, right? And this eliminates that, that practice of large changes. How it used to be in the past is you would develop all the changes that would be required, and then you have these maintenance windows, right? You'd have these extended maintenance windows when you're trying to push out all these required changes in one instance. But now with CI/CD, now you're introducing this concept of like incremental changes, right? So they're developed and pushed to the devices. Instead of just one large change, you have incremental changes and more frequent changes. And this is the practice that are being adopted by organizations. Right? They don't want to, they don't want the command line, one big change. They want this pipeline of changes where they're just constantly making innovations, testing those innovations, and then deploying them out to the devices. But as organizations adopt it, there's still many out there that are still heavily dependent on command line, or they just stopped at we're going to use the UI. They haven't fully automated their process yet. But there's some real benefits to IAC or infrastructure as code, right? And this is why many organizations are moving in this direction, right? It provides that consistency and standardization, right? Now I don't have to worry about configuration drift as people are logging into individual devices, and they may miss a device, or when they're copy and paste in the config, the device might reject it, and they didn't catch that the device rejected that. So so you have these, over time, you get this thing called configuration drift, where your policy or your configuration is not consistent throughout your infrastructure, right? So, but with IAC, you have that consistency and that standardization, right? You have this template of what your device should look like or be configured, and it's consistent and standardized across your infrastructure. And again, like I mentioned before, it's more efficient, right? It's going to reduce the time to implement changes, right? And back in the days, if you had 100 routers, you're logging into 100 routers, and you were pasting in that change into 100 individual routers, and you have to do your login credentials, and you're putting all that in. So you had to plan for these large maintenance windows, or you may have done it over multiple maintenance windows, just because the amount of time that it would take to implement this single change. That could be as simple as changing the IP address to NTP server. If you have 100, 200 routers, and you changed out your NTP IP address, guess what? You were going to all those routers and making that change. Now, with automation, I can just push that change out all the devices at once. So again, it just shows you just how much more efficient automation is. The other thing is version control, right? So if I'm storing my configuration in something like GitHub, right, is permitting me to know what is the latest version of my configs. And it allows you to track and audit any changes made to that config. The other thing is when I develop this code, it can be shared and reused, right? I don't have to like in the past, if I wanted to reuse a config from a router, and basically go into that individual router, pull it from that router, make the changes to it so it will apply to that new router I'm going to place it on, and then paste it back in. Now, using code, I can much more easily share and reuse that information. The other thing is, IAC provides faster recovery in event of infrastructure failures, right? Before, if we had a failure and we had to restore devices, you were going out and you're restoring configs on individual devices one at a time. Now you can redeploy the code and just restore the entire infrastructure. You could even roll back the infrastructure. Say you had a change and you didn't like the results of the change, or you didn't get the desired effect of that change. Now you could just roll back that code and then redeploy it, and you're rolling back a change across the entire infrastructure. So again, a lot of benefits to automation, IAC, and again, this is why this is becoming more and more in demand, because the efficiency of it versus how things were traditionally done or even still done today. So how does this apply to security specifically, right? Because we hear DevOps and oftentimes we think of automating the network infrastructure, but it also applies to security, right? Security is not an exception to this. The automation is coming to security as much as it's happening in the network side of the house, right? And what SecDevOps is really the integration of security into that whole DevOps process. And we're not just talking about the automation of security appliances, right? There's everything, any security task is going to be automated, right? This includes automating the security in your CI/CD pipeline, right? You're automating any real-time security monitoring and alerting, like Splunk, right? You're adding automation to Splunk. Your compliance checks, like HIPAA, right? You can automate these compliance checks. You don't have to do it manually. Automating vulnerability, right? And implementing those patches to any identified vulnerability, right? Again, these can be automated. Things that are manually done today can be automated. Incident response. So if there is a security incident, rather than waiting for your security practitioner to identify the incident and then apply the appropriate response, you can automate that. If there's common attacks, known attacks, you can automate that, right? So several of these tasks are manually performed today, and they're going to be automated. That's the direction, right? And this is that benefit, right? Any routine task that's manually done today is going to be automated, and it's going to bring the efficiency, especially in a security incident scenario. You want that rapid response. You don't want that time it takes for somebody to identify and apply the appropriate response to that event. You can just have it automated, so it just cuts down that time, so it reduces the impact that incident may have on your infrastructure. So how do you get started in SecDevOps? So of course, if you're new to the industry, you're going to want to start with the basics, right? So if you're brand new, hey, I just want to get IT, I want to get into cybersecurity, you still got to have that fundamental or foundational understanding of networking and network security. You can't just learn automation and just start automating your network or your network security appliances. You need to understand what you're automating. So, this doesn't permit you to forego understanding basic networking and network security concepts. You still have to learn that. But same time, especially if you're interested in becoming a DevOps engineer, and pretty much anybody in the future, you're gonna be doing DevOps at some level, right? you want to start building your skills today, right? You want to start early. And there's certain places to start, because honestly, there's a lot to this, but there's places to start, and a common place to start is learning Linux and Python, right? Linux is the operating system most network devices are built upon, right? So Juniper, Cisco, Arista, Palo Alto, right? All these appliances are running on a Linux operating system. So you got to know the basic knowledge, or have a basic knowledge of this operating system. You got to know how to navigate through Linux, especially if you start getting into Python. You're gonna have to know Linux, right? And there's a couple of popular versions of Linux out there. Ubuntu and CentOS are probably the two of the most common or more popular versions. So you're going to want to get your hands on a Linux box. You pretty much, you can build one at home. It's pretty easy. And you can just start learning Linux, how to navigate it. There's a lot of free resources online to learn the basics of Linux. But yeah, you want to get a feel for Linux, how to navigate through that operating system. And then Python, right? Python is that programming language, and it's widely used for network automation. It's like the de facto programming language for network automation. So you want to learn Python. So like I would start with Linux and Python, because Ansible is built upon Python. Now, the level you'll need to know Python is really going to depend on if you plan on writing your own custom Python scripts. Like, you know what, I don't want to use an Ansible or Terraform. I'm just going to write my own Python scripts to program my appliances. Then, yeah, you probably want to become an expert in Python. But if you're going to use something like Ansible, right? Ansible is built on Python, and a lot of what you would have to develop yourself has already been done by the vendors. There's these things called Ansible collections, and the vendors put these common tasks or modules inside the collection. So like, for a switch, like you're building a VLAN or building an interface on a router, that's a common task. So there's already a Cisco module or Juniper module in their collections, right? Their vendor specific collection to do that. So a lot of the work is already done for you. So for example, say you want to configure a Cisco ASA firewall, right? That there's a Cisco.asa module in the Cisco collection that already done most of the work for you. Just a matter of, kind of putting in the variables and that sort of thing. But a lot of the playbook is, or is built out for you. All right. So Ansible and Terraform are probably the two most popular tools for automation. But for networking and network security, I'd probably recommend you learn Ansible first. Terraform is more focused on cloud and often used by more advanced programmers. So if you're just starting out, and you want to learn how to automate your infrastructure, I would start by just learning to build Ansible playbooks. So just kind of wrap things up. Automation is here, and the demand is only going to continue to grow. There's many network engineers still resisting this change, but the days of command line are behind us. You got to be honest with yourselves. Nobody wants you running around, logging into 100, 200 routers and making changes. People even in the past automated that, but they're building their own Python scripts to automate simple changes because it's just too time consuming to go and do command line. So, those days behind us, have to accept that. Many are starting to stop at the UI, right? So you got Catalyst Center, you got Panorama, you got Nexus Dashboard, Fabric Controller, you got all these UIs, Juniper Apstra, that allows you to build your infrastructure and then push it out to your devices. And that's a great first step to automation. And that's a lot of organizations are doing that. They're using that orchestration platform to manage and configure the infrastructure. But that's just a stop along the way. If you're kind of watching where the industry's going, it's leading to full automation because, like I said, just clicking around a UI is still time consuming. And if you can just do it as code and push it out as code, it's more efficient and more consistent. And that's where the industry is heading. So in the future, every engineer is going to need they're going to have some level of automation skills. It's already appearing in entry-level certification exams. You're starting to see, a network automation piece like Cisco CCNA has a section devoted in the exam to network automation. And now you're having like entire certification tracks dedicated to DevOps, right? It's like people just specialize in automating the infrastructure. Like I said, security practitioners are no exception to this. Much of the tasks performed today manually are being automated. And, that's just the direction of things are heading. So, if you're getting into this industry, you want to become a security practitioner, I want to be a network security engineer, or if I'm a network engineer and I understand that I need to understand some security. Well, if you're going to understand some security, you're also going to have to understand automation, because as a network engineer, you're going to be automating your switches and routers, and automation is going to be applied to those security appliances. So pretty much everything in your network infrastructure is going to be having some level of automation. So you're going to have to learn that. And so it's time to start learning those basics. So, but again, like I said, this does not permit you to forego any or developing a foundational knowledge of networking and network security. You have to understand what you're automating. You can't just automate blindly. So if you have a real good understanding of network technologies and network security technologies, that's just going to make you better when it comes to automating your infrastructure. So that's where you really want to start, like really know the technology and learn how to automate it. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please add a review to the show notes. I really love the feedback. If you disagree, if you have a different opinion on this, I would love to hear it. You just always reach out to me. Let me know. I love to hear a different perspective on this, but just from my experience, this is where things are heading, and these are the things you're going to have to start learning how to do. I've been in this industry for a while. I resisted, to be honest, at first. I learned command line. I knew command line. I was efficient in command line, but overall, it's not efficient. So I moved to UI, but even now I see, I got to learn Ansible, learning Python. Just how do I automate? How do I build all that CI/CD pipeline? How do I truly implement IAC? So that's where it is going. If you want to be in this industry, if you want to be a good engineer or a great engineer, this is just going to be part of your skill set. So I want to thank you for listening. Until next time, have a great week. Do you want to be part of an online community of like-minded people? Join us at cyberjobhacks.com, where you'll receive the latest industry news, cybersecurity career trends, invitation to free events, and exclusive offers. So join our private Facebook group at cyberjobhacks.com.
Thank you for listening to the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please share with a friend who may be interested in becoming a cyber professional. Also, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. Your feedback is greatly appreciated, as it will shape our future episodes. Meet us here every Monday as we discuss the cyber job market and how to launch your career. Until next time, have a great week.